5 children separated from society. Number 5. Vanya Yudin is also known as the Russian bird boy. Number 4. Dina Senchar, named the Indian wolf boy, is. Number 2. On January 23rd, 2007, a Cambodian woman known as the Cambodian Jungle Girl came.
So I was just looking for a video about this concept of feral children, right? The book mentions briefly, and just to identify and highlight the importance of socialization, like just to point out what we already know, or what we could figure out intuitively, that a child raised in isolation, raised without socialization, without people around them, the effects of that would be dramatic and tragic and heartbreaking. And what I found was that the media tends to treat these cases as a freak show, something to gawk at and poke at, and they give them these awful nicknames like Russian bird boy and Indian wolf boy, Cambodian jungle girl. I mean, this is terrible. There was another one about Jeannie, who they nicknamed the wild child. And that was the one that I read the most about when I was in school. And again, it's still the wild child. It's just this sensationalistic nickname, and I can't decide. Anyway, I had to share it with my students. I had to try to demonstrate my frustration to you that this is how we handle that. People are awful. Anyway, welcome to our chapter on socialization. So the plan this week is to focus on 2 of the theories of social development that were highlighted in our text. That is Mead and a little bit of Cooley, because there's some overlap there that's significant, and then also Erickson. And so we're going to talk about like stages of development, and I think that's just a helpful way to think about things. The rest of the chapter is either, I think, a little obvious, a point that we don't need to belabor, like the agents of socialization. I mean, the fact that schools, your family, your peers, the media, the fact that these are the things that help inform and where you learn about yourself and how you form your identity, that these are very impactful institutions in that socialization process. I think that makes good intuitive sense when you just think about it a little bit, right? So I don't think we need to belabor that point. And then at the end of the chapter, we also had a little bit of a blurb on resocialization and total institutions. And we'll actually spend a good amount of time looking at the incarceration system and the prison system as a total institution, and this idea of resocialization. And so again, I think we're just going to kind of put a pin in that. So remember that term, the concept of resocialization and total institutions. Put a pin in that, because we're going to come back to it in a few weeks when we talk about the incarceration system. And it's not the only, and of course, prisons aren't the only total institution designed to desocialize and resocialize. Militaries are another example of that. But I don't think military training embraces that philosophy per se, the way it used to, but there is still the concept that they want to break you down and build you back up, right? Which is desocialization, resocialization. So that idea is still there in military training, but I don't think it's there like it used to be in the 60s and 70s and 80s. All right, but that's the plan. So let's first look at a couple of these videos. The first one is on Cooley and Mead, specifically Mead, but also, Cooley is mentioned in there as a way to sort of contrast and show how Mead developed those theories. And then Erickson. So Cooley and Mead were both more on the sociology side, even though Mead came from the philosophy department. And then Erickson is more on the psychology side. And this chapter, I think a lot of students really like this chapter because it highlights the overlap between sociology and psychology. Even though those two disciplines overlap in a lot of different ways in a lot of areas, this is the chapter where that overlap is most visceral. It's most, you can see it plainly. So I think a lot of students like that, and so we're going to highlight these two theories as a way to sort of view that overlap. So anyway, we'll start with the more sociological side of it, looking at Cooley and Mead, and then we'll look at another video that highlights Erikson, the psychologist. The big difference that I want you to notice about these two kind of different approaches is that substantively they're really about the same. They sort of cover the same ideas, the same basic concept is that other people are super important in the development stages. As you form your sense of self and get your own identity, it's important for other people to be there, and it's important for us to examine the role that those other people play in social development and cognitive development and in the development of your sense of self or your identity. So the focal point in the first video is really on the others, right? I mean, that's the focus. And then in the second video, the focus is really more on the individual, on the person who's developing. So again, and I think it's a difference of perspective, not so much substance, but just a difference of perspective. So just notice that, see if you can kind of pick up on that as we watch these two separate videos. And they're both coming from different sources, but they're both a little better produced than what I can do, but they're also not crash course sociology because I don't want to do too much of one thing. So anyway, enjoy.
Sociologists Charles Cooley and George Herbert Mead both thought that other people, could play a significant role in how we view ourselves. However, they differed in how they thought this might happen. Whereas Cooley thought that everyone that a person interacts with during their entire lifespan could influence our self-identity in some way or another, Mead thought that the process was somewhat more restricted. He thought that only certain people could influence our perception of self, and only during certain periods of life. And he also thought that the way that others influence us changes across the lifespan. For example, Mead believed that infants and other very young children were not actually influenced by others in any way. Instead, he believed that young children see themselves as being the focus of their own world, and consequently, they don't really care about what other people think of them. And at the same time, they also lack the ability to even take the perspective of another person. And for those of you who are familiar with psychology and with developmental psychology, you might realize that this is very similar to Piaget's concept of egocentrism. But Mead also believed that as we grow up, our beliefs about how other people perceive us start to become more important. And Mead thought that this happened through three distinct stages: the preparatory stage, the play stage, and the game stage. During the preparatory stage, children interact with others through imitation. So they might play with pots and pans when a person is cooking, or use a broom or a toy vacuum when their parents are trying to clean, which of course usually winds up making more of a mess. But these aren't really true interactions. But as these children grow older, they start to focus more on communication with others as opposed to simple imitation of them. And they get practice using symbols, things like gestures and words and other forms of communication, that they will later have to master as they grow up. During the play stage, children become more aware of the importance of social relationships. And Mead believed that this was reflected in children's tendency to pretend play as other people. They play as mommies or daddies or doctors or firefighters, etc. And whereas before they were really incapable of taking on the perspectives of others, now they're really focused on them. Now they're really focused on role-taking, or mentally assuming the perspectives of another person and acting based on their perceived point of view. And even though this might seem like imitation, the kind we saw in the preparatory stage, this actually goes way beyond it because the children are able to respond. They're not simply capable of mimicking social interactions, they're capable of creating them. During the last stage, the game stage, children's understanding of social interactions become even more developed. So during the play stage, children become able to consider the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of the individuals who are closest to them. But during the game stage, they start to understand the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of what Mead referred to as the generalized other, or society as a whole. And with this comes a whole new understanding of society. For example, children start to realize that people not only perform in ways based on what they personally believe, but also based on what society more broadly expects of them. They also start to understand that someone can take multiple roles, that people aren't simply moms or doctors or teachers, that they can be multiple things at once. And this is something that I actually recall from when I was a kid. I remember that as a really young child, I really believed that all my teachers did was teach. I thought that that was really the sum total of their existence. And so I actually remember it being really confusing when I saw them in a supermarket or learned that they had children of their own. And as all of this is happening, as children start to acknowledge the generalized other and they start to realize that people have multiple roles, they also start to understand that other people must have opinions about them, and that those perceptions are influenced by how they act and what they say. And so in response, they themselves begin to be influenced by these perceptions, and they start to be concerned about the reactions of others to what they do. But they don't really care about the perceptions of everyone they come across. They're mainly focused on the perceptions of the significant others in their life. And by that, I don't mean a girlfriend or a boyfriend, at least not exclusively, but by all the people who have important relationships to that individual: parents, teachers, close peers. And Mead believed that this understanding led to the development of the I and the me, where the me is our social self and the I is our response to the me. So the me is how we believe the generalized other sees us. It is what we learn through interactions with others. And the I thinks about what those things mean. So as an example, the me might understand that people in the US typically go from high school directly to college, but the I might wonder if that is best. If maybe it would be best if some people traveled first, or if they maybe worked for a few years. And I actually always found these terms to be somewhat confusing. And so the way that I think about it is to think about the me as society's view, and then the I is the individual identity stepping in, or our personal responses to what society thinks. And even though we have these two parts, and they might seem like they're conflicting, Mead would say that who we are, our actual self, is the balance of both the I and the me.
Who are you? Hi, my name is Matt, and this is Simply Psych. The theorist Erik Erikson proposed a theory of psychological development that he called psychosocial development. It emphasizes how the relationships we have with others influence the development of our personality. Nowhere is this better seen than in the formation of our identity, of who we are. Let's get into this. We're talking today about Erik Erikson. Erikson's theory of psychosocial development was important for psychology through the middle to the late 20th century. This theory of psychosocial development focuses on different stages in life and the relationships that people have with other people in each stage. Erikson's theory was the first effort to understand development throughout the lifespan, from birth until death. Each stage contained what Erikson called a crisis. This crisis consisted of interaction with other people, and through that interaction, the development of certain attributes, certain virtues. For instance, the first stage is between trust and mistrust. A baby, through the relationship with mom and dad, learns to trust them and trust the world around them, as long as they're consistently providing for that child's needs. However, if the child does not receive the consistent attention that's needed for their development, they may learn to mistrust their parents and mistrust the world. So this crisis between trust and mistrust is very important. Now, what we're talking about today is the crisis of identity, or an identity crisis. An identity crisis is part of the adolescent stage of Erikson's psychosocial development. Adolescence begins at puberty, around the age of 12 or thereabouts, and then extends all the way up until autonomous adulthood, when the person finally feels like they can be an independent adult. During this stage, a person is trying to discover who they are. They're trying to understand their place in society, their role within the people that they interact with. The most important relationship for an adolescent is friends, teenagers, peers in high school. The crisis in the adolescent stage is the discovery of one's identity or falling into role confusion. Through the interaction with their friends and their peers in high school, a person develops an understanding of who they are, or they fall into some sort of role confusion where they're not sure of who they are. Hopefully, this crisis is resolved positively. But the question remains, how does one develop a positive identity? How do the relationships that a person has in high school help them form their identity and discover who they are? To answer that question, think about high school. The relationships that people have in high school typically fall into what we call cliques. You know what cliques are, right? Groups of individuals that kind of have similar tastes and similar interests. There are bunches of different cliques, like say goths, or jocks and nerds and cheerleaders, which are kind of like jocks, preps, band geeks, and a whole bunch of other ones you could probably remember. Well, why do these cliques exist? Well, they exist because we tend to have friends, and those friends have similar interests to us. We tend to congregate with those people who have those similar interests, and up pop these cliques all over the school. Now, the question might be, are cliques a good thing? Are they a bad thing? Well, for the purposes of our understanding of psychosocial development, they're a good thing. They help us understand who we are, the kind of things that we like, and have relationships also with people who like the same things. If you weren't a part of a clique, you probably felt isolated. You probably felt like you didn't fit in anywhere. And then it's much more difficult to understand your interests and whether or not these are the things that you want to do as you move on in life. There were some people that floated between cliques. Maybe they were a jock and on the football team, but then maybe they also were in band and maybe they did well in school. This is not a bad thing. It certainly helps in forming one's identity, but cliques do serve the purpose for most people to discover who they are through their relationship with their friends and with their peers in high school. This concept of forming one's identity is a very important part of our life. We must form a good, positive identity, resolve the identity crisis into knowing who we are so that we can be successful as an adult. To explore this concept further, I thought it'd be interesting to sit down with my assistant Simmons to find out exactly how he was able to form his identity. Let's go do that now. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Good to see you. So, Simmons, tell me, what was high school like for you?
Oh, high school was great. I played a lot of sports, had a lot of great classes.
What kind of friends did you hang out with?
Friends, right. Most of my friends were good. Spent a lot of time with them. I mean, there was this one guy, total jerk. He kept wanting to work on this comic.
What do you think your friends did for you to make you who you are?
I guess they were good. They, like I said, we spent time together.
It sounds like your friends weren't really good to you.
Well, I mean, most of them...
It sounds like you really haven't formed a very positive identity.
Well,
It sounds like you have some really deep issues that you need to deal with. Tell me, how does that make you feel? All right, folks, that's all we have for today. See you next time. Tears are good for the soul. It's important to remember, each experience is unique. Each experience is different. Your experiences are going to be unique to you and help you form the identity that you have. My experiences will be unique to me and help me form my identity. And the formation of this identity is important for success later on in life. Let's take a seat. My mother used to say, "You are the company you keep." Well, she didn't know how right she was. Because when it comes to forming one's identity, Erickson actually agreed with her. If he only knew the legacy he left. Till next time.
That is our video for the week. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you are reaching out to me. We've got that special assignment due coming up very soon. So don't forget to reach out to me with any questions that you have on that. And have a wonderful week. I will hopefully hear from each of you soon. Thanks.